Hello, and thank you everyone for coming to this conversation. This is a part of a seminar series sponsored by CCSA at Brown on questions relating to caste and economics. In this series, we are inviting scholars to discuss the implications of caste on the economic life in India. We seek to understand how caste determines ownership of land and capital, assignment across occupations, outcomes in the labor market, and experiences in institutions of higher learning. Before I introduce the panelists for today, I would like to set the context for this meeting. We are three women economists coming from very different backgrounds, but sharing the experience and struggling in our own ways with the experience of of studying economics in two elite institutions in Delhi, despite our very apparent differences that are in no way comparable. I have been humbled by the grit and determination of these very special women at every stage of my professional and personal life, and have always wondered what element these two are made of. The choice of our subject was supposed to endow us with sophisticated tools to study complex social and economic realities. However, this hasn't quite enabled the economics departments that we went to in India to serve students who don't come from privileged backgrounds. My experience was that we were in denial about the way in which caste and class shape student teacher interactions in our classrooms and the campus. A section of economic students has been continuously made to feel grossly inadequate over a gold standard in economics that is set entirely undemocratically. So the question is, does the responsibility of a public institution end after the intake of students through affirmative action policies? Is it not incumbent upon a public institution to be sensitive to the needs of all its students and not just a select few? With Vineeta's permission, I would like to share an experience where Vineeta, Aditi, and I were involved in making a documentary about the lives of women contractual workers who worked on piece rate systems in very poor working conditions in Delhi. We felt the urgent need to employ tools that were mocked by our teachers as being too journalistic and lacking rigor because our textbooks did not enable us to critically analyze the economic life of people we most related with. It was at that time that Vineeta very courageously told the team that we were in fact filming a portion of her own life. As we went on to obtain formal education in a field that taught us so much about life, we quickly realized that these experiences did not make us good economists. That in order to succeed within the economics academia, students from underprivileged backgrounds had to learn the language of mathematics, English, and computer science, tools that are very unequally distributed in the Indian society by caste. At this point, I would like to introduce Aditi and Vineeta and call them to share their broad experiences during their early life as economists. So, Vineeta has worked as a research assistant at the Center for Development Economics. She has completed her master's in economics at Delhi School of Economics and her undergrad from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, University of Delhi. Throughout her school and college life, Vineeta has been an active member of the National Cadet Corps and was often seen running on college campus after sports practice. She was always late to class. Aditi Priya is a research associate at LEAD. She completed her master's in economics also from Delhi School. I am very proud to tell you that she is the founder of a collective called Bahujan Economists, which she will talk about in the course of this talk. Aditi also has a wonderful eye for clicking pictures and is an approachable and sensitive co-worker on the field in my various experiences of working with her before. Vineeta, would you like to start by talking about your experiences?
Sure. Thank you, Arshidi, for the wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers and Aarushi Didi for inviting me and giving me this platform to talk about my experience of getting education and my journey in the field of economics. I have always looked up to such an opportunity through which I can talk about education, especially education for those who come from not so privileged social background and are the first or the second generation learners. Being a first generation learner is a great thing in itself, But due to various challenges and difficulties posed by the education system, not everyone is able to achieve it. I feel somewhere our method of teaching is flawed in some aspects, which makes the access to education which limits the access to education by one section of the society. Starting from the school days, students face lack of guidance, things which seems really trivial, how to study, practical approach to learning, stress on concept building, and setting life goals become really challenging without any counseling. There is also lack of guidance on how to work on on our skills, which becomes really important when one enters the job market. So guidance not only help students set the path, but it also help acquiring skills and build social capital to walk these paths successfully. Absence of any aspiration due to lacking guidance makes education merely a task, leaving behind its real purpose of value addition in students. School's role as a guidance provider is of even more important when we talk about government schools. Students enrolled in government schools are highly dependent on schools for guidance. For coming from humble families, these are students who lack any guidance from their parents, from their families, and the friends around, making schools the only source of guidance for them. Neglecting such need of students, bare minimum is being taught in schools, just enough to cross the passing line. Very less time is spent on mentoring students. Rarely the importance of education is being discussed in the classrooms. So as a result, at times students, even with good academic records, end up looking for work rather than going for higher education. Yes, of course, there can be other factors for students to not decide to go for higher education, but yes, one is lack of information of importance of higher education. So now it would be not wrong to say that schools, and especially when we talk about government schools, they fail to fulfill their role as a guidance provider. So also, this sole dependency of students on schools for guidance can also be blamed on the approach of teaching. Most of the schools nowadays follow an exam-centric approach where more focus is given to memorizing things to score high marks. Current approach does not allow students to question things and to bring ideas. Changing this approach, that is allowing students to question things, discuss things, will obviously help us in better inventions, but it will also help them build a better perspective and become informed humans. Important issues like caste and other social issues are never discussed in the classroom, leaving students to carry others' opinion. So I feel healthy classroom discussions will not only help them understand these issues, but also fight these wrong practices in the society. Most of the time, there is a burden being imposed on students by the fellow mates and by the society for taking advantage of affirmative action. So this approach of learning will help us sensitize people towards the need for such action, and through this we can also encourage students from an early stage to fight these barriers and to make them understand that this is their right and not any charity being done to them. So having said this, there is a such lack of approach and support from early stage not only make these educational spaces inaccessible to one section of the students, but also being dominated by the few who decides what will be discussed and taught in the classrooms. And because of this, there is lack of representation of these people, and the problem faced by these students find no space in the classrooms. So yes, that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Vineeta. Aditi?
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, organizers, and of course, Arushi for this opportunity. I not sure how much of justice I'll be able to do to this platform, but I hope to leave you all with a question or two, so that is going to help us make this discipline more inclusive and more Dalit women and more students from marginalized community will be a part of it. Um, and it's a matter of immense honor for me to be sharing the panel with Vineeta and Aarushi. Both of these women I have looked up to for so many years now for inspiration. So thank you again for this. Before I jump to talking about experience, I would like you all to remember that being Dalit is not a homogeneous category. There are different types of experiences, and it's bound to be different. But here I am today sharing pain and also dream of so many Dalit women around me. Uh, yeah. So when this event was finalized, I was feeling too many things: sad, happy, and confused. Sad because it took it so many years for a platform to be created where Dalit women can come and talk about their experience. Happy that now that it's finally happening, but most of all, I was confused. I'm not sure confused is the right word, but let me explain what it was. So caste is not unknown to people in the world. Caste as a social location, as a social relation, as a research topic, it has been exported to the whole world. People from JNU, DSC to PSC and MIT, all of them are aware of this. They are working on it. But the strange bit comes in when we look at that caste-based discrimination hasn't been acknowledged in these spaces, especially in economics, when economists are year after year working on caste and its consequences. So I hope that with this discussion we'll be able to carry forward this idea and raise demand for making this discipline more inclusive. And to continue with what Vineeta said, since she talked a lot about school experience, classroom experience, I would like to add to it and say that um, for Dalit Adivasi student, the experience in these university spaces are very different compared to what it is for dominant caste students. Initially, a few years are spent in trying to ignore, but somehow then navigating through the fact that you are unwanted in that space because of your social location. And sadly, despite raising these questions again and again, there are the reasons given by those who in charge can be clubbed into two categories, which we can talk about later in detail also. But two broad categories are one is standard academic protocol, and the second one, everybody's favorite, is affirmative action, which we also call reservation or quota system in India. And again, reservation or affirmative action is also widely studied topic in economics. And the recent work that I have read was by Thomas Piketty in his latest book, where he talks about the importance of reservation, and he says a lot of things about how much this has been able to change the life of Dalits in Dalit and other communities in India. And despite that, despite all these evidences, reservation and those who come through reservation or affirmative action, they are made to feel that they are at fault because that they are taking benefit of something which is actually rightfully theirs. So and along with this high-handedness of economists, the another default in India, at least in our discipline, is that the default is set of that of privileged of upper caste community. Um, and this epitome of privilege is what students from Bahujan community are expected to aspire to become. If unless you reach that stage, unless you excel in the parameters set by those, as rightly said by Rashidi, undemocratically, you do not have merit, and this is solely decided by somebody else who has never had experience of what we went through, the hardships that we go through to reach these places. So I will give you an example to illustrate the point that I am making right now, and that this example is not hypothetical. I'm not saying that it is derived from some one person, but this is from the lived experience of so many Dalit Adivasi students, Bahujan students that I've seen around. For example, consider a Dalit woman from North Indian village, first generation or second generation student. Um, Being from this part of country, she only has access to a broken education system, and along with that, we all know that Dalit women are subjected to multiple forms of violence, be it inside classroom or outside classroom. Despite all of that, and as also mentioned by Vineeta, that aspiration formation is very important for students from first and second generation communities, first and second generation students. So lacking all of those, going through all the violence, through all the hardship, she manages to reach one of the top university spaces in India, for example, say Delhi University. And after reaching there, she is the one who is considered non-meritorious by the system, and she has to prove herself again and again, just because this was her journey until here. And all of this, I would like to repeat that this is not a hypothetical situation, or it's not an exception. What I have mentioned right now is indeed the lived experience of so many students in this university space, especially in economics. And despite all of this, the point that both Vineeta and I made about us considered not meritorious enough, it makes me wonder whether there can ever be better economists or researchers in India than upper caste men, because they have all the qualities which is needed. So we can talk about this later, and I would like to hear from you what you think about this. But because I have been thinking about this for a long time, um, and some of these things that I mentioned, if we look at that in episodes, it does not look too serious, because every student in these days in higher education struggle to get admission into good place, or employment opportunities is very very in a bad state in India right now. So it may feel like, okay, everybody goes through it, why are you making a big deal out of it? But the serious implication of this can be understood when you connect the dots, when you look at the background, and most importantly the consequences of it on the future of one huge large number of people from a community. um, yeah, so I fail to understand that despite having so much research on caste, on affirmative action, on deprivation, somebody got a Nobel Prize for their work on this, and still we are here talking about discrimination, still we are here talking about not being acknowledged. And I fail to understand why professors or researcher or even fellow students fail to accept the fact that somebody from these particular community might be sitting in their classroom, and they are when they are involved in such discussion, which may be which may be affecting students from marginalized communities in a bad way. But yeah, I think I can keep going on like this, so I will stop here, and then we can hear more from Arshidi and Vineeta. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think in addition to these valuable experiences, I would like to bring to the table some numbers that would enable us, at least in some degree, to generalize the experience of Dalit, Adivasi, and Bahujan students. This was at the time when both Aditi and Vineeta were still at the Delhi School of Economics, and this pattern of examination results at the Delhi school was painfully repeated annually since the time I went there, probably even before. So the best and the worst, in quotes, the best and the worst performers are found to belong to privileged and marginalized caste groups, respectively. None of the students from the scheduled caste category secured a first division in the semester 1 exams in November 2017. 84% of the students from this category could not clear at least one of the three compulsory courses. In all, 29% of SC and 41% of ST students could not pass all three papers in these exams, whose results were declared in March 2018. Disheartened, a large number of students from these socially marginalized backgrounds drop out after the first year. On the eve of a joint student teacher committee meeting held to discuss more accessible teaching learning methods at TSC while I was a student there, one professor went to the extent of reading out the marks of the toppers in a full classroom. The implication was this: our brightest students seem to be doing just fine. The failing students clearly do not work hard enough. Such remarks, completely ignoring the varied socioeconomic backgrounds of half the cohort of students, were outrageous. Is it unfair to expect a modicum of sensitivity towards structural causes of inequality, that too from professors teaching us about poverty? There are no support systems to help and encourage students in an environment where failure is so severely stigmatized. Vineeta, at this point, could you talk about barriers, including language and financial, that you faced during your higher education?
Yeah. So when I was in school, I knew that it is important to learn English as a language, but I didn't know that it is of so much importance that it can affect the learning itself. But now after completing both my graduation and master's degree, I've realized that to excel in economics field, you need to know economics, and only Arthashastra will not work. So language and medium in which the student has done their schooling becomes a barrier in learning economics in higher education. So it might be the case in other disciplines as well, but my experience allows me to talk about economics. Language issue is something that I feel is more prevalent in highly ranked institutions where all the resources available are in English medium, and all the classes also takes place only in English medium. So students who have English as their second language feels completely helpless at times, because as understanding classes, participation in classes, everything becomes really difficult. So other than this, the most difficult part is expressing yourself in an alien language, especially when you talk about the subjects like political economy and economic history, with the complex arguments being made in English. You will be surprised to know that universities do offer, and they do allow students to write exam in their preferred language. That is, the student have the choice to write the exam in the language in which they are comfortable. But in reality, I don't find that it is a choice. As I mentioned earlier, all the classes take place in English, and the books that are being followed are written by foreign authors, which makes it even more complicated. So finding their substitute is next to impossible. I couldn't find anything ever. So here I want to ask the economists and researchers one thing: do we really need to make things complicated for it to be good enough, or for it to get the Nobel Prize? We don't. So, but also there were few professors who were sensitive towards this issue, and who used to help student by going out of the way. They help student in their personal capacity, but there was lack of any initiatives or steps at the institutional level to acknowledge and address this issue. So yeah, if there was some initiative taken, it either lagged in designing or implementation. So other than lack of the other than the language issue, there was also lack of financial support. So lack of financial support is another reason that students of marginalized sections finds it difficult to complete their education. These are the ones who lack such support from their family, rather than they're expected to support the families. So this is a problem that I feel which is more severe in getting higher education, because at school level there are various schemes and policy run by the government, and also the cost of education is very low in public institutes, the government schools. So when we talk about the existing support in the economics department, most of the financial supports are only merit based and very limited in numbers. Lack of need-based support forces the students to work, leaving less time for studies and diverts the focus of the student. Later, this limits the access by the student to such merit-based supports. So at times, students are forced to drop out because of lack of financial support. But there are also institutes that offer stipends and fee shifts to help students pursue their studies, and there are few institutes in India. So now if you try to connect whatever I have said so far, talking about guidance and then the language issue and the financial support, all of this brings us to the points which makes the learning space accessible to these students who are not so privileged. But once you enter these spaces, you will find that the syllabus is also not relatable, because these universities follow standards set by the institutes in other countries, and whatever is being taught and whatever material is available it is not in Indian context, and written by the foreign authors. So if I want to, one thing that throughout our undergrad, we read Don Bush and other books to understand the ISLM framework, to understand the implication of monetary and the fiscal policy measures. But in reality, the central banks throughout the world, including RBI, do not use it. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it is not only important to make these spaces accessible to these students, but also relatable to these students. Yeah.
Thanks, Vineeta. You are making a very important point about barriers caused by the use of English in these elite spaces. I also want to point out that this is not limited to tackling coursework and writing exams. Interactions with teachers, both inside and outside classrooms, are hijacked by English speaking students, as this is a huge source of social capital. Such students have the currency to freely exchange their ideas with teachers who are responsible for writing letters of recommendation to students who wish to pursue higher studies abroad, for example. We need to answer the question to understand how excruciatingly exclusive these institutions are. How many Dalit students have we placed for PhD students in any of the big league colleges abroad? Aditi, would you like to talk here about this kind of social capital and what are the consequences of this for Bahujan economists when they graduate from these institutions? This also might be a good time, Aditi, to talk about the very important and exciting initiative called Bahujan Economists, and other reasons that you felt the need for such a.
Um, yeah, um, yeah. So this term social capital or privilege, these terms I think are very neutral because it do not tell you how these powers play out and in how many layers these play out. Um, I can only imagine how it feels when you have professor who shares your surname and you can go and reach out to that person. You can admire a person. That person is so close in your proximity that you derive aspiration from them and you can relate to the person. And this must be a totally different experience when you are casually able to share that you come from a particular caste, be it in class or be it in a work environment. And this experience is very different for Bahujan students because they have to carry the burden of identity whether they want it or not. I don't think I wanted it in the first place, but here it is now. So this system that we have right now, as Vineeta has been very nicely pointed out, it is rewarding privilege in a way that uh, every other person fails to meet the standard which has been set by somebody who looks like alien to this society that we're talking about. Um, and during my masters, as mentioned by you, Arshi, the fail rate was very high for students from Bahujan community, and it wasn't because people would jump and say that probably they were not putting in enough hours. But I would like you to remember that it's more than hours. The system that we're talking about, it's not valuing how many hours in a day you're putting in studying. It rewards the background, it rewards your privilege. If you do not have a quiet room in a quiet neighborhood, well kept room, you may not be able to give so much time to study, and if you're not able to do well in exam, you are not meritorious enough, and then it becomes a vicious cycle that you cannot escape. So one of the most widely used argument by those who tend to deny that there is anything called experience which affects the performance in classroom, they give two, like I've mentioned earlier, that one is affirmative action and one is academic standard. Along with that, Vineeta also pointed out about following the international curriculum. Um, so yeah, sorry. So these things undermines the experience and hardships that marginalized students go through to reach these spaces, like the example that I've said earlier. And the goal in the classroom, it feels like it's not to make coursework accessible to students, but it rather, at least at master's level, it feels that you want to pick student whom you want to provide all the resources and make and send them for higher education, and you want to make sure that the barrier is strong enough for students from non-privileged background to not get out of that vicious cycle. um, and it so you, from my personal experience, you become a part of prestigious institution. The proud stays for a certain time, and then it start transforming into guilt. You don't know why you're here, why you're being treated this way while you're trying to study, you're trying to do well. But I think masters, there's a huge change needed at masters level, because they simply no recognition, and they simply want to target a certain student, which has been defined already. um, and the only time when economists are comfortable talking about discrimination is when they talk about taste and statistical discrimination, which is another topic in itself, and I won't go that way. But that's the only interaction you will have in a classroom, where you can share your experience, or you can just relate to, oh, something is being taught which I can relate to. Uh, so in these classroom spaces, in these university spaces, especially in economics, from my own experience, from my master's and graduation experience, marginalized students have two options: either to focus completely on scoring well, or to they just let the attention of score aside, and they just focus on learning new things which interest them. Now you would say that, okay, go ahead with the second option, because that's exactly what everybody would want to do. That you want to pursue what you like. But there is a catch here: if you're not scoring enough, then you do not have the merit. And if you want to go that way, you want to opt for papers which is going to allow you to be a better scorer. It turns out that it is giving out signal to professors, and also if you're applying for PhD abroad, that you're not such a serious student, you have gone for easy papers. So there is no way, there is no option that you can choose and be considered good enough for the population that we're talking about here. um, and if anybody has any doubt and you want to see whether this makes sense or not, just look around in the optional papers that you have in your university. Who goes for what sort of paper, who is teaching them, and which one of those professors are able to place students in a um, uh, good admission graduate schools, or how the employment opportunities are affected by this. um, so I was at the situation, and I had to choose between choosing papers for marks or choosing papers for knowledge, and there was a trade-off, and I think the trade-off was huge. But yeah, so there's a policy, like has been mentioned by Aarushi and Vineeta, that you enter that place, so what? You got admission to prestigious institution through reservation. After that, what? At least until masters you are able to use that opportunity, you reach that place. After that, it is made sure that you do not go beyond that. um, and you will consider yourself naive for considering the fact that in masters you can actually focus on learning, because it's not the case. It is, at the end of the day, you are made to feel that you will end up blaming yourself for thinking of that way, that okay, maybe masters you can spend time in learning, because no, it is clearly, it is set in a way that it feels like a filtering students out, filtering the privileges out for giving them further resources. um, and academia in general is for privileged. This is what I have been hearing from everybody around, and this is what I have seen now. And academia in general is for privileged, but economics in general is for upper caste. That I would like to be proven wrong, but like I said earlier, there cannot be a better economist than upper caste men, and because they have the right ingredient needed to be a good economist. They have the right amount of sensitivity when needed, um, right amount they emotions when needed, or all these things. And I don't know who said this, but this has been the trend until now. And these people are also good to talk about oppressed. They are also widely appreciated for talking about caste and oppression. But it becomes a problem only when somebody from these communities, from marginalized community, come and start talking about uh, the discrimination, because then you become non-meritorious, then you become more of an activist and not an academician. There is some sort of threat involved when oppressed are talking about these things, because you are going to hold somebody accountable for these practices, right? So for example, in India, I'm sure some of you must be aware that Dalit women life expectancy is 14 years lower compared to other women. And so when the Dalit women succeeds in becoming a health economist, or say she enters these area, her experience is going to inform her research question, that is going to tell her, that is going to influence the hypothesis, and that is for some reason considered not a gold standard in economics. So there's, at every level there is a denial of experience, and at every level there's filtering out happening. And I think this is the right time to also talk about Bahujan economics, where it is entering. So in India also we still do, we have different schools of thought: feminist economics, heterodox economists, and they used to be really into, I mean, they were very popular at least a couple of years back, maybe not so much now. Um, and all of these people, I wouldn't say all of them, but some of them were at least sympathetic towards students from Bajan community, oppressed community students. And but it still, I don't remember them talking about representation so much. I think they only always talked about perspective. They were sympathetic. They wanted to have more equitable society, but that was without participation of students from these communities. There is an example from my village. So there is one uncle. I'm sorry, it's not a digression, just to make a point. So he is super helpful. He can help you from cooking to building a house. But he gets really upset when you thank him for the work that he's done, because he knows that if somebody is thanking you, he's not going to pay you. So he prefers to be paid rather than said thank you. So I think that is what is happening here. Those who were working on these topics, they were thanking us enough. They were very sympathetic, but it never turned out that anybody focused on representation. So I think that is where Bahujan Economists as a group is going to play an important role, because we are demanding more than sympathy and thank you. We are demanding representation and acknowledgement, which we think is very important. Otherwise, none of this is going to change. There were theories, like I've said initially also, worldwide people are working on caste, worldwide people are working on affirmative action, but the taboo around it, and whenever we question it, the repulsion that we face, it never went away. So probably now, with this group which focuses on both perspective and representation, we are going to have a a better chance of having a more egalitarian uh, econ, at least as a discipline. Yeah, so I think I wanted to say all of these. If I missed any question or couldn't answer, then I'm happy to come back to that and answer. But yeah, that's for now.
Yeah, I think while the three of us have been conducting, voluntary actions by way of bridge classes in the past, I still don't think we've been able to use platforms like Bahujan Economists to formulate a holistic pedagogy for studying caste, as we have currently limited ourselves mostly to the canon of mainstream economics. I don't think we can understand caste with its monstrous structural and institutional implications within the framework of mainstream economics. So I'm going to borrow heavily from Bill Spriggs' letter. Bill Spriggs is a Black economist who wrote a letter to the economist community in the US in the aftermath of the gut-wrenching murder of George Floyd. And like race, economists also consider caste to be an exogenous variable. This assumes caste differences and the distribution of merit as a natural order, for which there is no empirical evidence, as we now know. Economists do not emphasize the systemic violence perpetrated by upper caste groups to ensure that Dalits and Adivasis are relegated to a marginalized position with the inherent assumption of the dominant group superiority. Today, we have only discussed this violence in classrooms of the economics ivory tower by way of their nasty comments on ability or by setting a syllabus that does not speak to the experiences of Bahujan students. So how do we change this? We can do this by first recognizing that caste is a social construct, where I quote from Bill Spriggs' letter, the purpose of the construct is to have a dominant group designate a group to receive less of the goods of that society. And I hope that when we run regressions and do studies and find that even after controlling for all that our theory tells us, we come across a disparity, we will not be surprised. In fact, we will expect a significant effect because we know that the variable race, and in this case, caste, was meant to measure a marker for the group for whom the negative effect was intended. And I would like to emphasize the word intended. The practice of economics in India has chosen to ignore this maligned intent to cause harm and intent to marginalize, while taking intergroup inequality as a given. One wonders, is it because this profession has been dominated by people coming from precisely those groups that have historically harbored this intent? Vineeta and Aditi, how do you think we can move towards systemic change in the way we understand institutions that have created and perpetuated this inequality? Vineeta, do you want to go first?
I think that what we need for systematic change is the first thing that I think we need is awareness and acknowledgement by the people that there is one set of people who is left behind without access to resources and knowledge, and who now need an extra hand of help to stand. So at times, whatever policies, like there are steps and initiatives taken, but their implementation is not that good. And also, people need to realize the importance of these implementation. They need to understand that these people deserve it, these policies and these favors, because they lacked it, they were denied these in the history. So to change the mindset of the people and to help them understand the importance of the policies for people, as it is as important as the policy level change itself. So working on the mindset of the people is really important to make them understand that these steps are really important for this section to get uplifted. Other than this, the one thing that was mentioned by Aarushi Didi, that the responsibility of public institutions should not end after the intake of the students. So once the intake is in one the student once the student enters the institutes, after that, I feel after that the real challenge begins, because there you have by step you lack the guidance, you lack the support. There should be faculties helping these students. So there is a need for systematic help for the problems faced by the students, faced by the students, and this should be provided by the institutes. And not only this, and these should be institutionalized, so that later the institutes become responsible, uh, till not till not where the student get admission, but till the student completes their studies. And yeah, so they should be made responsible for all this.
Aditi?
Yeah, I think most of the things are covered by Vineeta. I I just keep hearing myself saying these things again and again, and that there is just not enough representation. There is just not an acknowledgement of the fact that there is a discrimination, be it in Indian circle or I mean non outside India academic circle. So I think the first step would be to acknowledge the fact that caste discrimination exists. Just circling back to the first point that I said during the introduction, that since everybody is acknowledging the fact that caste exists and it plays a very important role in access to resources, so why not acknowledge the fact that it affects the mobility when it comes to employment, when it comes to college education. So yeah, so that would be the first thing. That I don't have any recipe in mind to make it more inclusive, but it's just that unless there is acknowledgement, then nothing is going to take place. And also um, uh, I would like there to be a shift from of discussion from talking about making oppressed talk about their experiences and educating other, and then it's just becoming sharing of experiences, which becomes a little burdensome for Persian student marginalized students. I would like the discussion to shift from this to talk about privileges and what in what forms these privileges plays out, just to understand the fact that what is it that missing for the other students from other communities, because I think that discussion is completely missing in any academic field that we are concerned with. um, and let Virgin students, let Virgin economists talk about policies, because who else would understand the hardships other than those who have been through? So we have to, there's a lot of things that needs to be changed, but um, uh, just to put it very simply, it's acknowledgement and representation, which is the idea behind it. And for individuals, well-meaning individuals, or institutions, I think the first thing that everybody can do, because we know that government has some policies, we have affirmative action, but it's not leading to what the desired outcome. Of course, it's helping us a lot, but there's a lot needs to be done, and that has to be done at the institutional level. That has to be done at individual researcher economist level, because those are the one who determine the fate after, say, masters in India, or higher education level. So whenever you're employing somebody, you're hiring anyone, uh, you just have to keep in mind that representation is not a byproduct of inclusion. You cannot just go ahead and say that, okay, we want to be inclusive, and then hope that by this inclusivity you're going to have more Dalit women representation. You have to be very specific, and you have to target that. That is what I believe. And Now that I've talked about inclusivity as a word, I think I'd also like to make it very clear that this term, this idea is borrowed from, I think, US, because they talk about representation of minority. But what we are talking about in India is not the minority population being excluded, but it is actually the majority. Bahujan means the majority, right? So those who are dominating here, they actually come from a minority population. That's a very tiny bit of population who are at the top of all of this. And like I said, that I've repeated it 4 times now, but the upper caste men, the economists in India, I think those are very tiny in population, but the control that they have over it is immense. So I think that's what I had in mind.
Right. Thank you, Aditi and Vineeta. These are very important points, and we're hoping to channelize some of them through Bahujan economists. But it is still very important, as both of you have pointed out, that these steps, these initiatives happen at the institutional level, and they're not extended to students from marginalized communities as favors. So yeah, I think that's we're at the end of this conversation, but right now we would be happy to open the floor to questions from the audience. You can either post in the chat box and I will moderate your questions, or you can unmute yourself or let us know. Okay, so maybe there's one question here. There was one comment that I received from Vikrant. So I would just like to read it out just to highlight the difference between India and the US. Vikrant talks about the thing I mentioned about the marks being announced publicly. I think that was only one aspect. All our marks were displayed publicly in Delhi School of Economics, and we tried to change that, but it was just convenient to display those grades for everyone. Vikrant says this is wrong, and in the US where he is, which is UW Madison, it is a crime if we make the marks publicly available. The first question is from Kanika. Could you tell us about what kind of journeys Bahujan grads in economics make after getting a degree? Vineeta and Aditi, maybe you could both talk about what you're doing right now.
Didi, can you just elaborate the question? I'm not able to make sense of it. Like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kanika is asking what kind of journeys Bahujan grads in economics make after getting a degree. So maybe I was wondering if you want to elaborate on what you are doing right now, your
Oh,
RX
oh,
and your preparations, just in
yeah.
an way.
So I thought she's asking about the journals we produce. So then I was like, no journals. So it was journey and not journal. Okay. So yes, yeah, it's after passing. Yeah, obviously the experience in these two institutes were not good also. But I'll like to say that somehow these two institutes have prepared us for the hardship, and now I am able to help a lot of students and able to guide a lot of students, because now I think I feel it will become a second generation learner, because I was the first generation learner. So yes, after that I started working as a research assistant with some of the with one of the professor at Delhi School of Economics. As I have mentioned when I was talking, that there are few professors who help students, and I think because of them, and for me at least, their role plays really important for wherever I am standing today. And after that I am like I'm hoping to prepare for economic services, and to be part of the system and work on the policies for many more generation to come, for make the space accessible to them. Yes, that's what.
Thanks, Vineeta. Aditi?
Yeah. So I think Vineeta always covers everything, so I just have to keep adding to that. So our journey after econ degree can be understood in I think three opportunities. Please correct me, Arushidi, if I'm missing out anything. But first is that placement. Placement is very important for students. Sorry, just a minute. Very important for students because at least I know in these schools, many of our students who get want to take admission there is because they want to be placed in one of some of these companies which come there for placements. But it turns out that I don't have exact number, Kanika, but I have observed this in a couple of years that the placement rarely reaches say OBC. They take all the students from Stephens, SRCC, LSR, and upper caste students from these colleges in the first or second round, and then later some of these companies also employ OBC students, but it rarely comes down to students from Dalit and Adivasi community. So that is a placement bit that is college placement that I'm talking about. But after the degree, they can also apply for jobs outside the college. The second and third options that they have after this is admission in PhD programs or research. So I am a researcher working as research associate for a couple of years now, and I think there's a better opportunity of in this third option in research, because there are some researchers coming up who are really keen into having more representation. But I think the most of the students face huge problem when it comes to admissions abroad, because of the things that I mentioned initially, that you'd never have good enough marks to be considered to be receiving a letter of recommendation, and the marks become very important when you're applying abroad, especially for example, real analysis. Real analysis is like the gold standard for PhD program in econ, and if you're not able to do well, they just filter you out at that level. So have I answered the correct question, Arshidi, or no?
No, I think it's nice that you have been able to talk about your journey through your experience as an aspiring PhD student. Um, Tanika, I have a follow up question. She's asking, how can we ever break new grounds in economics? That's I think that is very wide, but I think some of those things we have talked about in terms of breaking ground. But do you have anything to add to that, Nita and Aditi?
So I can't see her question for some reason.
Uh, she sent it to me privately.
Could you share it with me? Then I will have. I can answer the question later when you have shared it
Yeah,
with me. We can answer the
sure.
question.
Um, So unfortunately, I am not able to unmute people who want to ask questions. There are two questions here. But so if you have a question, please send it to me via chat, or send it put it in the chat for everyone, and I will read out your questions. There is one for from Ankit, I think, who is asking what is the epistemological premise of Bahujan economics as a distinct school of thought with respect to economic principles? How does it fit within the body of knowledge of economics?
Thank you for the question, Ankit. Actually, we don't have much clarity on this. We have just started, and at least with the discussion with the members, we are really hoping that we'll be able to establish this as a school of thought. But we are still exploring this. It's not been too much time that we started, so maybe we can come back to this question, or maybe you can give us some suggestion if you have any, but I don't have exact answer to this question. But I would like to hear what you think, because since you posed this question, if you have any suggestion or any idea, please share. Or Vineeta and Arshidi, if you want to add, please add to this.
There are a lot of questions. Yeah. Shilajit is asking, I was wondering that how decentralization of education could be functional as the focus is mostly on the elite educational institutions. Also, how can we make disciplines available in more vernacular medium? So maybe Aditi, do you want to address the first question about decentralization? And Vineeta, would you like to think about how can we make disciplines available in more regional languages? Aditi?
Yeah. This is a really good question, and we also have been wondering about this. At least through our platform BE, we are trying to reach out to students who are not from Delhi or Bombay circle, because we know that, for example, in Bihar, I don't know what is how exactly econ is taught and whether any aspiring economists come from these areas. But at least I can tell you from the platform that we do have many people who are from, say, uh, uh, state colleges, and they have brilliant ideas to share. And the most important problem I think they face is that there is no, again, the system that we're talking about, it's highly dominated by upper caste professors who do not who just sits there, who they don't have so much interest in research. Even if they do, it is limited to certain type of research which may not interest our people. And I think I missed in saying this initially, that experiences influence a lot of these hypotheses that one want to talk about, one want to work on. So to decentralization can be is the most important tool in making sure that econ this moves out of telecircle, and there is more ideas are brought into this. And yeah, I think that's what I want to say.
Vineeta, do you want to think about how we can make education in economics more accessible in regional languages?
Yeah. So I think like right now to say on this, like how to make it available in regional languages, I don't have exact answer to that. But I feel those coming from the regional backgrounds, they can be helped in achieving in learning this economics in English. So maybe like there can be remedial classes, and when these students come to these spaces, then they should be held by the institution itself. Other than that, I feel the not only the higher education institution needs to think about it, the school system and the primary education from they also need to change it, and they also need to think about the problems and the students that they can face when these students go to the elite institution. Because students who perform really well in like if I talk about the I was since I was from a Hindi medium student, I was a Hindi medium student, so I from starting only, since I knew that later all the material will be in English, so I used to try to study stuff in English medium only from that age only. So I was a bit aware. So that's why I emphasize the role of the guidance, because if that is not there, then you cannot start your preparation from an early age, and then later all of a sudden realizing that I want to do, then it is not possible. So steps both at the primary level and the higher level institute should be taken. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, to this entire question, at least from DSC experience, what I've seen that most of the students who do not fit the parameters set by that institution is they come from state universities, or they haven't been taught into English medium. For example, uh, I, at least DU students have a edge over other students who have been taught in Hindi, or they are from, say, Patna University or Lucknow University. So these are causing major barriers in, when even when they reach that spaces. So I think the alternative is, can be understood in two ways. One is either we make economics more serious, and more inform our students in these state universities, be in touch with them. And the second one is raise the demand for a curriculum in these elite institutions, where students are at least able to reach, those who are able to reach, because they have limited seats. I don't think more than 500 students from Bahujan community must be studying in DSC, JNU, ISI, and all these institutions. So that's a very small group that can be targeted, but even that is not being taken care of. And the second alternative that I talked about was reaching out to our students in non-central universities to enrich ourselves also, and provide them with the resources which they lack, even though they have ideas and they are really good at it.
To the question of languages, I just want to add two things because that is something I have been working with uh, as a student of economics. The first being availability of translations that needs to be done, which is a very controversial problem because the question then is what language do the English readings get translated into? But when we were students, we maintained that at least start with Hindi and then we'll talk about the rest. It is you can't have a stalemate before you even start. So at least start translating in Hindi because in our experience, we were in Delhi and most of the students were coming from Hindi speaking belt. And the second thing was that it does seem that English turns out to be a barrier at every stage in life. At Delhi school, we had asked for training in English for students who were coming from Hindi medium backgrounds, and for which we had even suggested where to get the funds, how to hire a teacher. So clearly, it is that not only have we acknowledge that these barriers exist, but we don't want to do anything about them, even though the solution is plainly in sight. So clearly, there's something more than the fact that it's clearly that the problem is not solvable. So, yeah. So these are two very concrete suggestions that have been made to these institutions but have not been implemented. And so Sahil is asking a question. Perhaps Aditi, you could answer this because of your experience as a research associate. What sort of barriers did you experience while conducting research related to caste? Was it availability of data, institutional support, fieldwork issues, etc.? Just if you could be more specific.
So the research that I have done until now is not just about caste. It involves maternity entitlements, gender-based violence, and child health, maternal and child health. So it's not directly related to caste, but it involves the implications on Dalit and Adivasi women. However, the problem that I faced was largely related to access to data and institutional support, because um, like I said earlier also, that uh, this closed circle, they do not share data among themselves. and it would be too naive to expect that they'll be willing to share data with us. So it's availability of data and institutional support. From my personal experience, I never faced problem in fieldwork. I think that was one of the best work that I did, and the most enriching experience I had. But for I so No, actually, yeah, that's what I want to say. um I haven't really worked on anything specific to caste, so I don't know how to answer that question. But uh, data availability is a huge issue. I You cannot do anything, and uh, these community who is dominating economics, they have access to data. If not data, they have access to a closed circle who is willing to share data, or just any such body who has control over data. So that is one of the biggest problem that we face. I mean, for example, it's not a very substantial one, but there is no data on maternal health caste wise. So you don't know, even though this trend has gone down. I think I haven't checked recent data, but maternal death is coming down, but we don't have any information on whether how the trend has been for different castes and different communities. So first one is the availability of data itself, and the second one is access to data. So there are a lot of issues that are happening because of availability itself, but access to data is the problem, which is specific to researcher from a certain background, which would include Bahrain economists. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that given that government data sources, administrative data sources in India are all not publicly available, we all know of cases where administrative data not in the public domain has been released to particular researchers. And we would be in denial if we don't recognize how caste is tied to the kind of social capital that lets you access those data sets, which everyone cannot. So definitely you end up being a better researcher if you have the right kind of connections by being born in the quote unquote right caste. So in the chat box, there is a very invigorating discussion, Aditi, on the epistemology of Bahujan economics, and that is something that we have been going back and forth over and thinking about in the context of feminist economics and heterodox economics, which have been a source of great inspiration. So I think these are very useful comments. Thank you, Hemant. Thank you, Ankit. And Aditi, what I can do instead of reading them out here is save this and send. We can all Vineeta and Aditi. I'll send these to you so that we can think more clearly about Bahujan economics, the separate school of economics. So one comment that might be worth reading out is that the general body of economics is specifically based on capitalism, not going into the background or social identity of people, while what Bahujan economists may deal with specifically as a field, say, of development economics, which can help in addressing the deprivation or related with respect to Bahujans. So it might be instructive to read Gendres and Amartya Sen on actually how economics can uh, address problems faced by Bahujans. Um, okay, yeah, Kanika has response to that. I'm sorry, it's a little overwhelming. Okay, yeah,
We can save this, right? I
yeah.
would just read this.
I
Thanks
think
for
it's a very useful conversation.
yeah.
And it's I'm sorry we cannot allow everyone to unmute themselves because that is we don't have the rights to do that. Um,
But just I'm happy to have this conversation outside this session also. So feel free to write, or just we can plan another session and listen to you all your ideas. Yeah.
uh, yeah, are there more questions from the audience about what we've discussed in the talk?
I think there are two questions. One is by Prakriti and another one by Shilajit. Another one. So Prakriti has question about specialized infrastructure to support student.
Okay. Can you read it out? I don't see it.
Okay, it's upar. We need a couple of questions. The point about specialized infrastructure to support students outside of general caste, how do you deal with the problems that causes in the psyche of the general caste due to perceived favoritism, as was the case when the government implemented reservation in 5/6 and related protests? So, if this is about Bojan Economist, we were aware of this, but we made it very sure that every time somebody wants to be a part of it, we just ask them whether you are a Bojan or not. And we have been receiving emails about sessions that we do to include them, um, but we I we haven't faced any anger as such yet. But if we do, I think we are very clear with the objective that if you want to share resources, you're happy to be you'll be included. You can share it, but the target is specifically for our students. So um, I haven't come across anything like that yet. Hopefully, but if something like that comes up, I think we have made it pretty clear since starting only that. We are not going to entertain that. We don't have that much energy that we have is going to be for our students, because we still haven't been able to reach out to everybody who is not from these top 20 schools. So that is where our energy would lie. So yeah.
We can go back to the follow-up question from Shilajit before. I just wanted to read a comment by Hemant, which I think is very pertinent to the discussion about Bahujan economics as a school of thought, where he says that we need to move away from a representative agent model of analysis. In a casteist society, there is nothing homogeneous about human identity and entitlements. And I think that is a very valid point. And I think that is something that is possible to do within the canon of mainstream economics, as has been done in macro and related fields. So that still may not justify why we need a separate school of thought, perhaps. Going back to Shilajit's question, he is saying, what can we do about the fact that people who get educated in elite institutions don't go back to these backward places, relating to his question about decentralization of and moving the discussion from these, in our case, two elite institutions to the numerous state universities, and how do we ensure that people who get good training actually go and become teachers there, carry it forward.
Vinu, would you like to answer this, because I think uh, you you're the best person to start this.
Yeah. So, being the question that those who get trained from these elite institutes, they don't like to go back to these places. So I think this is much of a thing. Like, if someone has faced this, and who has gone through all the trouble, they know how hard it is to study in these institutes. So I think they will be the people who will be going back to these places, and definitely, so it is more about being personal decision of the people who are there, not just to talk about the social change, but really making the social changes. And it is not always the case that you have to take really big steps to do that, but yes, in your personal capacities, whatever small steps you are able to make, you should do that. We cannot ask everyone to just do really big changes. If somebody is able to guide, if you are if anyone like if anyone is from a background where they see that not all of the people are getting education, not everyone is sending to their child to these, so those small kind of steps can also be taken. And yes, those who are aware of these things and have faced these hardship, I think they will be the ones going to the places where there is more need of guidance and everything. So yeah, so those will be the people. And yes, obviously we cannot say that everyone will be going to these places to help student and guide them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think a lot of students that we are talking about right now, they themselves are struggling a lot because even though coming from these elite institution, it did not benefit them so much. And in fact, if you do not have good enough marks from, say, Delhi School of Economics, then that tend to put you in a bad position, because then there is a taboo that, oh, you come from this college but you are one of those not so well performers. So I think a lot of these can be explained through the problems that they themselves face in elite institutions. And I think we have to be a little more patient when we talk about it, because it's been what, at max two generations who have been into colleges, and econ as a discipline has always left, has been not I mean, not pursued by our people so much, the Bahujan students so much. So I think this is just the starting, and we can be hopeful that people are going to go back, teach or work, and there are research topics that they're going to explore. Um, and that is why I wanted Rita to start, because she is one of the best examples that we can talk about, because she's always been teaching. Sorry, Rita, I'm saying this without your permission, but we see that we have first, second generation women who are working and who are going back to the places and they teach. So let's be a little more patient with Persian students who are in economics right now.
Um,
I also want to add something here. So, as you were saying, that it is those students who are passing from these institutes, they themselves are facing problems and various challenges and difficulties. So, I feel like it is not, we cannot say that, even like I myself cannot say if I will be able to go to these institute, do these areas and will be able to work, because right now also I feel that it is more important that I myself make stand, and so that the next coming generation I can ask them that these were the challenges that I faced, and still there is a section who are still facing, and make them aware. And the thing that I was talking about, the change of mindset is needed, that people needs to be made aware that there was a section who was left behind without resources and knowledge, and you need to work for them. So that kind of awareness, so not only the Dalit or the marginalized section will go to these section and help them, but also everyone around needs to be made aware, and they can help, all of us can help each other, and this will happen over time, and yes, obviously not very fast.
Yeah, Vineeta, thank you for making that important point. And just to emphasize what Aditi had also said before, more than like questioning maybe Bahujan students to sort of go back to their roots and bring and help everyone rise with the tide. I think it is very important to also ask this question to the privileged who may not go back to precisely these places which we are talking about. So it's a little unfair to sort of put the entire burden on the first generation learners, the presence of whom in these academic institution is a revolution in itself. So I think yeah, we have to be a little more sensitive about that. And at the same time must echo what Aditi said about Vineeta. Since the day I have known her, since the day she stepped foot in college in the year 2014, she has been teaching tuition classes to everyone in her locality. She has been working with the tuition teachers that taught the coaching class where she learned so that she could sort of pass it on. So that is definitely one example that we must always look up to. Other questions?
Or comments.
Okay, I think we're good in that case. I'm going to save the conversation about thinking of Bahujan economics as a separate school of thought, because that is somewhere where we have been planning to do a lot of thinking. And I think this session was actually a great place to actually get into, put on our thinking hats about that, and hopefully we can organize a follow up session on it. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Vineeta and Aditi, who made it despite all logistical problems. And thank you everyone for coming.
Just want to say a couple of things when we end.
Yeah.
Just letting you all know that it started as a sad story for a lot of us, but we are hopeful that it won't be that way. And we have so many women, Bhajan women and Bhajan students in general in economics, and we are trying to connect with them and learn from your conversation on Bhajan economics and economists. We are hopeful that going forward, it is going to be a better place for all of us. And yeah, thank you for all the comments.
Yeah. I also want to sum a few things that whatever I've said, like talking about everything, that this is not there, that is not there, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. I want to say that still there are few people who are helping us all where, like if I talk about myself only, from school to here, there I because other than these experiences, these hardships, but I find that there are people helping each other. So maybe rather like it is important to institutionalize these help, really important, because I don't know till when one can depend on personal help, but I whosoever is listening to us, I really want to like request you and all of us that this when it comes to help others, you don't need to think, you do not need to reward. In whichever capacity you can help, you should do that, because these institutions and everything is made up of us only. So if we don't make ourselves responsible for doing this, then we can also don't ask the institution, because there also we are sitting, we are making all the decisions. So if in your personal life, if you are not doing this and then you expect the institutions to do that, then I feel that it is something wrong, and the steps needs to be taken in your personal capacities, and so that they later it can be institutionalized and make this society inclusive for everyone, and for all of us to move to a better society. Yeah.
Thanks, Vineeta. Thanks, Aditi. And I guess bye everyone.